you. Give you all the time that you need. You're very welcome.
Well, it's very good to be back here, speaking here again. I see some new faces here, in contrast to last Wednesday night. Right? Is it all right? Yeah, I can hear myself now. Thank you. I started meditating when I was young, 18, London, and didn't give it up till when I was 37, and when I became a Seventh-day Adventist. But the amazing thing about meditation and Buddhism and all that, it fits so easily everywhere. And when I became a Seventh-day Adventist and sat in church, I could hear pastors using Buddhist stories in relation to not being materialistic, for example, renunciation. So, that it's so flexible, it's so subtle, that it can actually come with its subtlety into various religions, governments, schools, therapy, and so forth. And when I began to see how it took shape and came into Christianity, I was alarmed. And I began to write and research and speak to my friends. There were speakers who came from the US, and I tried to convince them how important this is. But those were the days before Sacramento Central took on the responsibility and produced 7 videos. Nobody would listen to me. But when Sacramento Central came up with the 7 videos against it, people began to take notice. And then Stephen Ball came up with, I think, 14 or 12 videos, Emerging Spirituality. And then it became more and more pronounced, more emphasized, and people began to take note. And then I began to speak and was invited by Dr. Neil Nedley to speak at EQ Summit. That was last year, February. And because a lot of people who were looking at this, wondering, trying to grasp it, when they heard my material, that's when they took me and got my material exposed into Canada, into various parts of the US, into Australia. So I'm really grateful to be here again to speak with you. I was born in Malaysia. This is Annan, Malaysia. It's up on a hill. I'm chairman there. I go there 4 or 5 days a month, and I give devotions and I talk about health. It's a beautiful place. You must try to visit it. Well, sitting from the porch, which is right there, right, that porch, and looking out, if it was a cloudless morning, a not so misty morning, this is the scene you will see. It's tucked away in the hills. And we have our own schoolhouse. That white building there is staff housing, is a schoolhouse. And the red building there is our doctor's residence. So we have a Bible college, a 3-year program. Eugene Pruitt from the US is running it. We've got a 1.5-year program for students, about 20, 25 students from all over the world, mainly China. So the folks there they speak 2 languages, English and Mandarin. So because they're Mandarin speaking, Chinese speaking, they're able to minister to China. Now, China is a closed door. Foreigners can't go in to minister, to speak. So over there, we've got a TV studio in the basement. We produce Mandarin speaking things on health, on Bible, on preaching, and we send it to China. And we've got a website to which the China people can tap in. So we've got a little work there tucked away. We are still land scarce, I think, in Malaysia. We are on 13 acres of land. You're already 4 in the city. So we're tucked up there pretty nicely. And we've been there in this place, we've been there for 6 years. But we've been in this work, starting at another place, for 17 years now. So we've been doing this for quite a while. And it's a great work, a wonderful work, something that has been a benefit to me. I became Seventh-day Adventist. I became aware of what Seventh-day Adventism meant through the health message. And it's been such a blessing to me and my family to have had this aspect of life. So I'm, in the final analysis, the beneficiary. And because it's so powerful, so wonderful, I want others to know about it. That's how I got associated with Annan. All right, I'm here to talk about meditation, mind, and spirituality. There are basically 3 talks in sequence. The first one, neuroscience, the brain and mind in meditation. The second one, meditation, silence, and nothingness. Now, you know as well as I do, meditation is characterized as silent, nothing. We empty the mind. But it is a misconception altogether. Because the belief systems only tranquilizes the mind. It doesn't give hope and optimism. But if you had hope and optimism, it actually gives you peace and tranquility. So it's a double benefit, okay? We'll see that, more of that tomorrow. And then tomorrow afternoon, as a second session tomorrow afternoon, I'll talk about humanity's spiritual trajectory. And as you see the first 2 parts, you will sense, in relation to Scripture and what Ellen White is saying, where all this is going. Right? And you will get this strong sense. And you will also get the sense that we, the Bible, and our truth correlates, converges to identify what's happening very clearly. And I'm studying this and realizing this. I've become so inspired, so established in our faith that we're all going the right direction. So I'll begin this evening with neuroscience. On the right, biblical meditation. It is focused biblically. It's personal. It's in relation to God as a person. And it's in relation to love. It's active. It's not passive like the East. It's active. It's interactive with God, the person. It's reflective. It's passionate. It's consummate, as in love. Right? And it's purgative at the same time. It compels you, in the love of God, to look at and discern what's right and what's wrong, what's good and what's evil. Now, in contrast, on the left, Eastern and Western derivatives, Western derivatives of Eastern meditation, they are detached by mantra, detached by following your breath, and detached by koan or riddle. Let me explain that. If you were asked to focus on your breath, just counting it in sequences out as 1, 2, for hours, several days, and you're focused on nothing but your breath. Are you focused or detached? Or if you were asked to focus on a spot of light, are you focused or detached? You're so focused on a spot of light, you're detached from everything else. And that's the objective of mantras, breath, and koan. Now, let me explain koan. When I was doing Zen, well, one technique was to follow your breath in cycles of 10, very relaxedly, and to think of nothing but that breath. And breath is nothing, right? So it empties your mind. So you're detaching by focusing on your breath. Now, koan is the Japanese word for riddle, and Zen is Japanese. And so the riddle to empty the mind was what is the sound of one hand clapping? Nothing. Okay? Now, this seems very harmless, right? And it does all kinds of things to relax you, but let's see what it does to your brain, and then what that brain activity, neural activity, does to your mind. Right? So there's nothingness and silence, and they say it's self-observation, being conscious of yourself, but it's non-judgmental. What you feel and what you observe, you're observing it dispassionately, it's value-free, it's bare attention. That's how they characterize it. So there are no values. There are no right and wrong, good and evil, nothing. You just observe it. Okay? But I'll go more into that so that you understand the purpose of why they say that's what you should be doing. Now the ACC, let me read the words, right? A special part of the frontal cortex called the anterior cingulate cortex, the ACC in short, is our neurological heart. It is here we experience love, compassion, empathy, sympathy, altruism, and the ACC is also the seat of the will, the place we choose right from wrong. Now the frontal lobe is 33% of the human brain, 3% of a cat's brain, 17% of a monkey's brain. So the human being has that frontal lobe as the biggest portion of our brain. And the frontal lobe holds the ACC. And the ACC is responsible for these things. Now, are these things important in relation to Christianity, in relation to worship? Choosing right from wrong, right? Love, right? So this is a crucial part of the brain. Now, hope and optimism. When the ACC is activated, your amygdala. Now, your amygdala is what causes you to be stressed. If your boss asks you to work, doesn't give you any help, expects it to be finished Thursday, week after week after week, and you get no help, he's unsympathetic, you get stressed. And the amygdala becomes very active. Right? And over the long term, you get depressed. Now, but if you can succeed in activating your ACC, your amygdala calms down. Activation of the ACC gives you hope and optimism. Now, meditation alone just calms the amygdala. And most people are satisfied with that already. But if you could activate your ACC, you calm the amygdala, and you have hope and optimism. Now, what would you like if you were given that choice? It's obvious. You want the ACC activated, and you get calmness, and you get hope and optimism. Right? Now, having known that, let's see what meditation does to your brain. All right? Yoga Nidra. Yoga Nidra is characterized by depressed level of desire for action, passiveness, associated with decreased blood flow in the prefrontal. Now, your frontal lobe is very important. ACC is there. Blood flow decreases. Is that good? All right, that's Yoga Nidra. If you Google, this will be one of the most common description of the effects of meditation. During meditation, the frontal cortex tends to go offline, the most common phrase. And what does it mean? You have your frontal lobe. It's there, it's healthy, but it's taken offline, like put aside. Right? There are many activities that are put it aside. Blood flow or reduced blood flow is just one. We'll see. Andrew Newberg, he's one of the top researchers in this field. He said, the results of this study, a particular study is doing, might also suggest that meditation-based practices affect beliefs and experiences through a frontal lobe and a parietal lobe network. Okay, so there's a relation between the frontal lobe and the parietal lobe. He goes on. And when they are doing meditation, okay, the parietal lobe goes dramatically down. Now, how does that happen? He said, when you're meditating and you are not allowing any information to come to your frontal lobe, you're starving your frontal lobe. What happens is when your frontal lobe is starved, your parietal lobe goes down. Now, it's bad enough to starve the frontal lobe, right? Okay. But what is the parietal? The parietal lobe is what tells you where you are in three-dimensional space. To begin with, you know that you're sitting on this side, and you're not on that side, that you are maybe 20 feet from the ceiling, you're about 10 feet from me. And it gives you a sense of your body shape. It gives you a sense of your body shape and tells you where you are in three-dimensional space. Now, when parietal goes down, you lose all that. You lose your body shape, you lose your position in three-dimensional space. Now, what does that do for you? It's quite euphoric. It's quite ecstatic, because when that happens, you feel that you are the universe without limit, and the universe is you. Okay? So you feel that physically you are without limit. Mentally, infinite. Spiritually, no borders. Liberated. Okay? Now, this is the deep end. Right? This is where meditators want to go. This is their high point. And so, Newberg said, I think it's the next slide, yeah. They lose that sense of self. They feel at one with God, at one with their spiritual mantra, whatever it is they are looking at. Whoosh. Everything. Now, at that stage, this is the icon of meditation. At one moment, you're a drop of water. In the next moment, when that happens, when the parietal goes down, you are part of the cosmic ocean. Or you're at one with the universe. All right? But they also attach other things to it. Now, let me back up a bit. Now, we learned that the frontal lobe goes offline. And Jordan Grafman, he is a cognitive neuroscientist, director of brain injury research at Institute of Chicago. And this is what he said. The frontal lobe are the most evolved areas of the human brain and help control and make sense of the perceptual input we get from the world. Further investigation revealed that damage to a specific area of the brain known as the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex was linked to markedly increased offline blood. She's on YouTube, Jill Bolt Taylor. She had a massive stroke. She is a neuroscientist. She had a massive stroke one day, and as the stroke erupted, she felt that the border of her body was disappearing. It disappeared into the walls, and she had no border, and she became one with everything. And then, as in her own words, she said, the me and the we in our brains. In other words, we are not alone, we are not one. We should have cosmic consciousness and be attached to everyone and everything. All right, so this is an amazing situation. She got very popular because this thing about being one with everything is the high end of meditation. So she was interviewed by Oprah Winfrey, and she's got millions of hits on TED. Now, Newberg and various scientists say sometimes meditation results in profound changes in consciousness, leading individuals into trance-type states, states of self-hypnosis or mystical states. So the scientists are saying it is self-hypnosis. What's hypnosis? Hypnosis is the ability to suggest something to you which is not true. But how does that happen? All right? Now, Columbia University tells you how it happens. Now, there are a lot of words on 2 slides, but I will just explain it, right? So Columbia University looked at what is hypnosis. What happens in the brain when it allows itself to be deceived, that a suggestion comes true? In the frontal lobe, again, there are 2 places. One is called the ACC, as you've seen. Now, one of the things that Dr. Jennings said about the ACC was, the ACC is responsible for the will, right? Now, Now, so the ACC is the will, and that's what Columbia University confirmed. But there's another part in the frontal lobe called the lateral frontal cortex, the LFC. The LFC is responsible for reality. What's right? Reality. What's real? So the ACC and the LFC, the will and reality, are working all the time. It's your sentry. It protects you. Right? You've got to figure out, is this real? If it's not real, I'll reject it. And my will says I'll determine to reject it. Now, after they had successfully hypnotized people, Columbia University, and they said 30% of Americans can be hypnotized. That's a typical average. After hypnosis, the will and reality, the ACC and LFC, are one or the other is off, switched off, not functioning. That's after you've been hypnotized. Okay? Now, I'll tell you a story, make it up as I go along, but to bring this out, how it happens. Andrew Newberg, that neuroscientist, he said, in relation to people who are speaking in tongues, and he was looking at that as well. Right? When someone is speaking in tongues, he said, their frontal lobe is quiet. But when the same person is asked to do gospel music, the frontal lobe comes back to life. And then he said, switch back to tongues, the frontal lobe goes quiet. And he said he saw this in every case. Now, in other words, there is a hypnotic effect there. All right, now, let me make this story up. Let's say I am invited by some friends to go to a charismatic church. Never been there. And as I walk in, people are speaking in tongues. And people are slain by the Spirit and writhing on the floor. And I'm shocked, and my will and reality goes into overdrive. I say to myself, oh, this is not real. And my will says, I'm not going to fall for this. All right? So I withdraw. But a week later, the same friends say, come. We want to introduce you to some good friends at the charismatic church. So I go along again. And this time, same scene. People are speaking in tongues and being slain by the Spirit. But this time they introduce me to their friends. Oh, this is the top surgeon in town, the top doctor, the top lawyer, and the top banker. And my will and reality are affected by that introduction. Because I say, oh, these are good people. And my reality says, this is real. And if my reality should switch off, I accept the suggestion that this is real. That when you speak in tongues, the Holy Spirit is with you. So the situational, no one's waving a watch over my face. But the situation has the power to suggest to me, to hypnotize me. It's a situational hypnosis. Right? Now, if I begin to speak in tongues, my frontal lobe goes down, and I'm more susceptible to suggestions. The next suggestion that comes to me would be, in that church, if you're slain, whoa, you're definitely filled with the Holy Spirit. So if I'm speaking in tongues, my frontal lobe is down, that suggestion comes through, and I'm slain. Right? So that's how hypnosis works. ACC, LFC. Right? Now, 30% of Americans can be hypnotized, right, by another. But if Americans are doing meditation, mantra, and so forth, it's self-hypnosis. In that case, because it's self-hypnosis, 100% of meditators can be hypnotized. Right? 30% hypnosis by another. Self-hypnosis, oh, you're open to yourself. So, meditation is, Eastern meditation, is hypnotic, and it's self-hypnosis. Now, James Bray, he's the founder of hypnotism, a Scotsman. And he got pretty popular. He wrote a book. And the book spread out and went east. And James Braid's point is you need another person to hypnotize you. Right? But when the book went far and wide, his friends in the East said, hey, James, no. People in the East, the Magi of Persia and the Yogi of India have practiced this for 2,400 years for religious purposes. They are hypnotizing themselves. So James Braid took a look at this situation and he said, there is no need for an exoteric influence. In other words, there is no need for an external influence, another to hypnotize the person. When they're meditating, they're hypnotizing themselves. That's possible, he said. Now, so, the Eastern practices, Eastern meditation, gives you sensory phenomena. You know, it takes the frontal lobe offline, it's hypnotic, it's more awareness of self and so forth. And these neural phenomena, they launch you into that sense of divinity. False divinity, I must say. All right? Why is it false? We've got to talk about that now. So it is a practice, a methodology that suggests that there is divinity in every man, irrespective of who he is. That's where the danger is. So here is the icon again, that drop of water. When your parietal goes down, you're one with everything, one with your next door, the person next to you. If we were meditating here, 30, 40 of us, and we succeeded in getting to that state, all our parietals go down, we are one. Now, that's beautiful, isn't it? But when the parietal goes down, a lot of things go down. Your sense of what's right and wrong goes down. We'll look at that. Okay, so when your parietal goes down, the East calls it Advaita, they call it Satori, they call it liberation, enlightenment, cosmic consciousness, universal consciousness. These words don't refer, it is about consciousness. It's about energy, it's about being one with the essence. But God, in those terms, is not a person. It's energy, it's chi, it's gravity, it's essence, it's spirit, not a person. So, the theologians call it pantheism, where God is everything. This would be familiar to you. The essence of God, the energy of God, is in the flowers and the trees and the air, and therefore in everyone. Now, pantheism was from Dr. Kellogg. All right? And we had dealt, as a church, we had dealt with that. We had the experience 100 years ago of having defeated this. So we know what we're talking about. So that is pantheism. Now, the Christians are doing this meditation mantra. And when they get to that stage, what happens? They say it is oneness with God, the person. On this side is energy. On this side, with the Christians, it's panentheism. God, the person. I'm in touch. I'm one with God himself. Because when your parietal goes down, mentally, you are infinite. Physically, you're also infinite. Mentally, you have no borders. Spiritually, there are no borders as well. And let's go into how that happens. All right? Now, pantheism, that word. Pantheism. Pan means all. Theism means God. Not a person, universe, right? Energy, the stars, the moon, and the galaxies, right? So all, everything, all is God. Energy, no person, right? The question now is, what is the next stage of development of this falsehood? The next stage is panentheism. Pan, again, all, theism, God, but this time it's God the person, not universe, not essence, God the person. The word en is within, inborn. Within everyone is God, spirit, or the immortal soul, or the inner divine, inborn from birth. Panentheism. That's the next logical step. Now, is that dangerous? God in everyone. It ignores that there are differences, good and evil. God and Satan, heaven and hell, it ignores all that. To make it panentheistic, it has to ignore that. And the mind in meditation gets to a stage where it cannot differentiate that. So let's look at the practices. So Hinduism, when it greets each other with a word, it greets each other with this word namaste. Namaste. And what does it mean? It means I honor or I see the divine in you. It asserts that there is already a pre-existing born divinity within each. And then the reciprocating greeting, namaste. I also see the divine in you. So it's cultural. It's not only religious, spiritual. Right? It's embodied in their practices, in the concept of nirvana, and in greetings. Now, I want to make this point clearly with everybody. Non-dual, what is non-dual, okay? And I'll go through this again. I did this on Wednesday night. Let's say you're all on the right, righteous people, right? Wonderful people. But the people on this side, I beg your pardon, you're all wicked. That's good, you're differentiating. All right. So, but me, I do not differentiate. I sit with you sometimes. I sit with you at other times. I am beyond differentiation. I am above it all. Okay? I do not differentiate. That's non-dual. But when I do not differentiate between you and them, I don't care. So I have actually merged the both of you. I don't care. I don't take sides. There are no sides. You're both one. When I don't differentiate, you're both one. Am I right? Yeah. Or in the case of a spy, I'm a spy, and you're two countries at war. I spy for you against them, and at other times I spy for them against you. I don't differentiate. As far as I'm concerned, you're both one. When you don't differentiate, you make them one. Opposites become one. You follow this? You must get your mind around this very subtle thing in the East. All right? Okay, this one you might grasp, right? You're good, they're evil. I don't differentiate. And I say to you, I love you. Can I say that without differentiating? If I say I love you both, that love is valueless. Because I am so indifferent to you, I can't possibly love you. You follow this? I couldn't care to love you. So to say, oh, I don't differentiate, and that's how I love, it's an impossibility. To love is to differentiate. I love him, but I don't love you. It's to differentiate. But this is where they're going. Right, so it's a very dangerous spiritualistic concept, non-duality. And so we have the Dalai Lama, and he said, what is love? Love is the absence of judgment. Love is when you don't differentiate. Not possible. That's a lie. Conceptually, it's a lie. Okay? Now, Ellen White said, there's this kind of spiritualism, the ones I've been talking about, but there's a grosser form of spiritualism. To the self-indulgent, the pleasure-loving, the sensual, spiritualism presents itself under a less subtle disguise than to the more refined and intellectual. We were talking about refined and intellectual, but this grosser form, in its grosser forms, they find that which is in harmony with their inclinations. Satan studies every indication of the frailty of the human nature. he makes the sins which each individual is inclined to commit, and then he takes care that opportunities shall not be wanting to gratify the tendency to evil. He tempts men to excess in that which is in itself lawful, causing them through intemperance to weaken physical, mental, and moral powers. So what she's saying is there's a grosser form. If we don't care about what we see, what we eat, when we sleep, what we hear, that's a grosser form of spiritualism. So there are many forms of spiritualism. There's that grosser form, and there's that intellectual form, and we're dealing with intellectual form because you will see that the intellectual form is what is unifying leadership. It gets into U.S. Congress, it gets into the United Nations, and you see how it's being used. Now, Buddha's non-dual, pantheism, I talked a bit about that, right? It is good in relation to all being one, with no differentiation, all right? But it is applied, non-differentiation is applied to good and evil, life and death, sin and righteousness, heaven and hell, God and Satan. No differentiation. Because the mind in meditation cannot differentiate and does not, and is incapable of differentiating. Now, therefore, their tagline, because they don't differentiate, all is God, and God is one. Everything is God. And that's where Dr. Kellogg was going. Now, the meaning of nirvana in that context, right? In Buddhism, nirvana means transcendental state in which there is neither suffering, desire, nor sense of self, and the subject is released from the effects of karma. Karma is good and evil. To be released from good and evil, there's no differentiation between good and evil. And the cycles of death and birth, death and life, if you don't differentiate between death and life, you're released from reincarnation. So, in non-differentiation or non-dual is the foundation of Eastern beliefs and their practices. Now, I was doing Zen. This is one of the top Zen masters, Thich Nhat Hanh. Now, when I was doing Zen, it was energy, it was essence, it was being one, it was mind over matter. There was no talk of God, the person. But recently, the East is talking about God, the person. They're going from pantheism to panentheism. And so here's Thich Nhat Hanh saying, we do not have to look for God. We do not have to look for our ultimate dimension or nirvana. He's going away from nirvana because we are nirvana, we are God. Nirvana becomes God. We're going panentheistic. So what's happening is this. The previous picture. This is pantheism. Everything is God. The flowers and the trees, the air, and every man, right? God not as a person, but as essence. Okay? Now, this picture here, panentheistic means there is God the person, the blue. And there is the universe, but God the person so operates and saturates the universe and penetrates it to the extent that that orange part is like that. So, panentheism contains pantheism. Right? It's not possible to be panentheistic without being pantheistic. Right? That's where it is all going. So, Zen is going panentheistic. Coming closer to false Christianity. Okay? And Christianity is going pantheistic. So they're coming together. Okay, this Father Richard Rohr, a Catholic monk, very successful. He trains, thousands of people every year, speaks at tremendous conferences, and this is what he said. We either honor God in all things, or we soon lose the basis for seeing God in anything. We must see God in everything. That's panentheism. In a conference that he organized, now more than ever, we see our collective shadow on full display, exposing fear and bigotry, yet dualistic, oppositional energies cannot bring the change we so desperately need. So here he's attacking dualism, right and wrong, sin and righteousness, because they divide. If we say, hey, these are bad guys, these are good guys, we divide. We must not divide. We must unite, right? And so he's saying, that's our shadow, our dark shadow in full display. Only the contemplative mind, the meditative mind, can hold light and dark, good and evil together. Only unitive consciousness, holding these things together, allows transformation at the deepest levels. So what he's saying is, if we don't differentiate between good and evil, we'll unite. And what's the price of that unity? And in another book he wrote, Oneing, Becoming One. I'll have to read this. The search for a supposed perfection is the most common enemy of simple goodness. God just wants us to be humanly good, not perfect. Good people can always accept and even love imperfection. So he's going away from the idea of Christian perfection. He's going away. He's going in the opposite direction. To be one. We've got to go away from that idea. Now, we talked about that deep end of when the parietal goes down. But to get there, there are a lot of other neural phenomena for non-dual, to induce you into non-duality. Okay, in the Buddha Pill, a book by two psychologists who were very friendly to meditation. In fact, their parents did meditation, and when these two people started to write the book, they wanted to title the book From Monster to Buddha. In other words, it's transformational. But as they wrote and did their research, they realized there's not that much substance in this stuff, much as they were friendly to it in the beginning. And they changed the name of the book to Buddha Pill, not From Monster to Buddha. Why? Because a pill sometimes works and sometimes doesn't work. There's doubt. Okay? So, Buddha Pill. And here they're saying this. When one meditates, and even if we use the Sanskrit mantra, one, right? Or Om, it makes no difference what we use. Because they said you can use, and these are from the experts, the people who actually meditate. You can use the word Coca-Cola instead of Om. You say Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola. And it does the same thing to your brain. And here's a picture of my late Prime Minister. And he was meditating with this Benedictine monk. And when he turned up on the first day, it's all in the newspapers, he said, the Benedictine monk said to him, you can choose a Christian mantra, Maranatha, or you can choose a Chinese mantra, Amitofo, seeing that that Mr. Lee was Chinese. And Mr. Lee chose Maranatha. So the story really attests to the fact that you can choose whatever mantra you want. Coca-Cola, Maranatha, or Amitofo, which is my language. Okay? It doesn't matter. The same thing happens in your brain. And that's what's most important. At this stage, I must tell you this too. At the end of their meditative sessions, after quite a while, he interviewed Mr. Lee on video. And he asked Mr. Lee, did you detect, when you were meditating, something divine within you? Now, Mr. Lee is known to be an unbeliever. But in meditation, he was trying to fish out, hopefully, that Mr. Lee had detected divinity within. But Mr. Lee said no. He said, I'm stressed, I couldn't sleep, and I meditate to help me sleep, and sometimes I drink wine. and it works better than meditation. So maybe that's why they took the video offline. Okay. You are now probably, hopefully, in beta wave. Beta is fast wave. You are listening to me, you're comparing notes to what you know. You are saying to yourself, I'll check this out when I go home. Maybe he's telling me lies. It's fast wave, right? When you start meditating and going through that mantra, you go into alpha, which is a slower wave. Pre-sleep, you drift. If you're in church and the pastor is boring, you go into alpha. And when he says 10 words, you hear 7, you miss 3. Your mind is here, and there, without seamlessly, you drift. That's alpha. And in deeper meditation, people go into theta, deep sleep. Right? That's when your wife wakes you up and you miss the whole sermon. That's theta. Now, you get more of these waves than beta in meditation. So you feel very tranquil, very pleasant, as if you're falling off, drifting asleep. There are more of that kind of wave. Right? Now, the interesting thing is really this. Many universities, including Brown University, are looking at this alpha waves, right? And they're saying when alpha oscillations, waves, are prominent, your sensory inputs tend to be minimized. You are not receiving sensory inputs. Neuroscientists at Brown University are doing research on how the brain achieves optimal inattention. Inattention, but optimal. Right? Alpha waves, they want alpha waves for optimal inattention. Right? And they say, the Brown researchers hope that teaching people how to harness power to ignore. Okay? In other words, optimal inattention, power to ignore, by creating an alpha brain state through mindfulness. Now, mindfulness. Mindfulness is actually Buddhist meditation and Hindu meditation because the person who founded mindfulness, Dr. Zen, Berkeley, stripped it of its religious meaning and gave it technical meaning. And so it's called mindfulness. But they do the same thing. They follow the breath. So by following the breath, you get the same neural phenomena. And when the alpha waves come on, inattention, your mind drifts. But it's good for people who are very stressed. Right? It helps for a while. So, that's mindfulness. Sanitized Buddhism. That's what it is. Now, when you meditate, your amygdala, okay, that amygdala, the stress, that's the fight and flight, it calms down. So if you're depressed, your amygdala is over active. When you meditate and you calm down, you feel good. But here was an experiment. They showed 2 times 108, so 216 images to people who were asked to meditate for 8 weeks and then stopped for 8 weeks. So before they meditated, they showed them these pictures. Some were delightful, some were neutral, some were frightening. After they had stopped meditating for 8 weeks, they showed those same pictures again and recorded their reaction. The delightful were not as delightful. The neutral were blah, blah, blah. The frightening were not as frightening. So the amygdala was quietened down, and 8 weeks after, and you are sedated, even 8 weeks after. Now, if you were stressed and was losing concentration, depressed, that will make you feel good. You regain concentration. But if you thought to yourself, I will do more of this to give my life a lift, you think that'll happen? No. Because the delightful is not as delightful. It's sedating. You follow this? Right. So it's what's the word? The US word for a plaster that's a temporary fix. What? It's a Band-Aid. So, here's the ACC again. This is what is so important, and this is what we need to preserve. And this is what meditation attacks. Now, dopamine. Dopamine comes on in meditation a lot more, 65% increase. And dopamine is addictive, and it causes greater visualization, heightened sensory imagery. So, you meditate, you get tranquil, you get all these phenomena happening, and you get addiction. So this stuff just takes you along that path, keeps you on that path until your parietal goes down. That's designed for that. Okay? It keeps you addicted. Now, it also causes visualization, heightened sensory imagery. In other words, you see things that are not there. You can see, the Beatles were meditating, and they were taking drugs at the same time. Okay? They could see music as light. A friend of mine who has Parkinson's, he's given dopamine pills. He was an artist. But on dopamine pills, his artistic capabilities were heightened because it's visual. Okay, temporal lobe is also affected, right? And they stimulated the temporal lobe with magnetic waves. And these doctors, they found that people who were under this God helmet, they called it, experienced what they perceive as God. 80% of these participants experienced presence besides themselves in the room. So you feel. First you get all those neural, and then presences. Right? So you think you're one with God. Now, I want to go to look at Psalms 19, and this is very important. I've told you the bad side of Eastern meditation. Now let's look at the gold standard of Christian meditation. That's Psalms 19. King David was meditating. In verse 14, he said, "May the meditations of my heart, right, be acceptable to you, O Lord." So the first verse 1 to 13 was King David in meditation. And this is what he saw and what he expressed. The heavens declare God universally, handiwork, his speech, knowledge. He saw the sun, and he said the sun is a bridegroom, a strong man, to run a race from which nothing can be hidden. Then he began to meditate on the law, the statutes, commandments, judgment, and they were fine gold and honey. And they gave warning and reward. And then he came to this point. He said to God, "Clean me from secret faults." Now, secret faults are faults that you don't even know about yourself, which if your wife told you, you'd reject it. That's secret faults. He was making himself transparent to God. And it was done in the context that God loves him. There was this strong man, this bridegroom, coming to run a race. The bridegroom came, and it was going to be a wedding. And he was meditating on law and the statutes, and they were better than fine gold because they were cleansing. And he wanted to be cleansed of his secret faults. And so he was transparent to God and said, "God, search me. Let me know what I don't even know about myself. Because there's going to be a marriage. The bridegroom cometh." And then he said, "Keep me from presumptuous sins. Let them not have dominion over me." Presumptuous sins? Yeah, as someone who is high and mighty is always presumed that they're doing the right thing. But to be shown that, not all that you think and do for the glory of God is for the glory of God. He was opening his heart to God in the context of love. Now, love is, the power of God is not blind. It is a searching light, but it is a comforting light. In love, we are allowed, enabled to admit to our own weaknesses, our own sins. So it is cathartic, it's cleansing. And that's what King David felt in his meditation. He began to differentiate, not began, he acutely between right and wrong. His faults, his sins. Now, in Eastern meditation, what happens? You do not differentiate as your high point, nirvana. Right? It's the complete opposite. And the brain and the mind is so manipulated that you do not even differentiate between right and wrong. And that's your high point. And that's love. So, it's King David, it's consummate love, as in a marriage. It being faultless before God. Sins are revealed and cleansed in sanctification. Now, we're going to talk about sanctification, Hebrews 2:11. Now, all that we want, every one of us, is to be one with Christ. If we had that, assured of that, we would, in my Chinese way of saying, I would die satisfied. Right? That's how the Chinese say it. Now, Hebrews 2:11, it says this. He who sanctifies, Christ, and they who, no, it starts with this, both. He who sanctifies and they who are sanctified are one. And he is not ashamed to call them brethren. So both Christ and the sanctified become one. Now that's a beautiful word, right? Sanctification. We become one in sanctification. And he calls them brethren. Right? And if I hear Christ calling me brethren, I died satisfied. Now, there is Matthew 25:40, and this is the judgment scene, right? The ones on the right, ones on the left. The wise servant, the wise virgins, the sheep, and the wicked. And the king said, when I was in prison, you visited me. To the ones on the right. When I was hungry, you fed. When I was naked, you clothed. And they said, when did we do this for you? And he said, when you did this for the least of these brethren, the sanctified ones, my brethren, when you did it for the least of these, my brethren, you did it for me. Whatever you do for them, you do for me, and whenever you do for me, you do for them. We are one. Sanctified brethren. But these are wicked. So, sanctification is oneness. And that's where King David arrived at. That's so important to us. So what's happening in the world today, as you scan the scene of meditation, where it is going, and I'll show you where it's going. It's saturated the Eastern philosophies, the culture, the practices, the religion, and it's coming west into the Christian church. It's come into mindfulness, into therapy. It's in Greek philosophy. So the saturation is getting stronger. And once the West is saturated and the East has been saturated, Satan has us not differentiating. And where did all this start? The tree of knowledge of good and evil. It was not about distinction between good and evil. If it was, and we'll go into that, if it was, Eve would have gone back to that side. He said, come on over. On my side, you don't need to differentiate. And it's better than that side. Don't listen to about picking from this tree and not that tree. Don't differentiate. Come on over. That's where it started. And so from there it started. It went into Tower of Babel, because they, at that point, Nimrod was deified. So Nimrod had the immortal soul. And an immortal soul in everyone, that concept, that evil concept means, what does it mean? It means there can be an immortal soul which is of God, divine, and a person can be evil, and they can be one. good and evil as one, indistinguishable. So that concept went into Nimrod, went into Egypt, went into Hinduism, and 500 years after the flood, it was in the word Om, the meditative word Om in Hinduism. Right? Then into Greek philosophy, into Buddhism, and into Tai Chi, and yoga, and acupuncture, into yin and yang. The East is saturated, the West is getting more of it, and that brings, it would draw, would ensnare people and bring them back to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That's where it's going. So, but what is against it, what stands against it, is to distinguish and be sanctified between good and evil. That's where the mighty clashes. Now, Proverbs 8:13 says, the fear of the Lord is to hate evil. Pride and arrogancy and the evil way and the froward mouth do I hate. Now, the fear of the Lord is to hate evil. The love of God is to hate sin. The more we love God, the more we hate sin. Right? And where do we find that word, the fear of God, right? It's in the first angel's message. Fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and the earth and the sea and the fountains of water. When we fear God, when we love him, we hate sin. We want to be sanctified. And when we are sanctified, we give glory to him. He raises us from glory to glory. And when we are sanctified, we want judgment to say that we are sanctified, to distinguish between sanctification and wickedness. And God gives his people who are sanctified a sign that they are sanctified, and that's the Sabbath. And this message, the first message, has two other messages which are the enemy of the first message. Because the second message says, don't drink that wine. It's the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Right? Now, why is this wine so evil? And what is this wine? Ellen White says very clearly, it is heresy. But she lifts up two active ingredients in this wine. The first one is the immortal soul. The second is Sunday. If you drink this wine, you'll accept the mark. So, the immortal soul, that evil, suggests, and the meditative practices suggest that it is okay. We are born and we can exist forever combining good and evil. Sin and live. So, the message is be sanctified. Stand against evil. And the evil, second angel's message says, warns us against the evil, warns the world against the evil, and tells us, not just us, but to tell the world not to accept that mark, and tell the world to be sanctified. So a mighty clash is developing, and it's seen in the three angels' message, and the world is now looking at Christianity and every other religion in the terms of unconditional love, and we like that. We need the unconditional love of God. But when does the unconditional love of God, when do we cease thinking, God loves me, God loves me, God loves me, and it's all about me? When do we cease that? To do that? When does his unconditional love really have an effect on us? It is when we love him back also unconditionally. Right? That's when it comes to life in us. So the unconditional love of God is a two-way street. And our reciprocity is when it really works on us. And the Bible calls us to that height of love. And the three angels' message, for the people who are giving it, right, the faithful of God, for others, they are going to lose their wealth, can't buy, can't sell. they are going to lose their life, the death decree. So at that height of love, they say, they love not their life unto death. And there's no greater love than when a man lays down his life for a friend. And these people in the Bible, the 144,000, lays down their life for those in Babylon, calls them, although they are enemies in Babylon, calls them friends. Come out. My people, people of God, come out. So the height of love, this message is the height of love, the height of the result of sanctification. And the three angels' message is not a message of fear. It's a calling to the heights. Now, meditative practices routinely kills off your frontal lobe, kills off the neurological heart, kills off the ACC. Now, what fires together in your brain wires together. When you learn French, your ability to learn French, that network is thin. But as you go through it, it thickens and becomes thick, and your ability to speak French is there. When you stop speaking French for a year or two, 5 years later, it goes from thick back to thin. Now, when we live in love, when we render our lives in service in unconditional love, our neural network, our ACC network for love, for unconditional, grows from thin to thick. We are raised with the power from God, thickening our ACC network, giving us hope and optimism for others. As much as it is for ourselves, it is for others, enabling us to give that message, compelling us to give that message. So we are drawn as a people of God, as faithful people of God, faithful to the message. God giving us the ability, activating us, but the repetitive meditation is trying to kill that off. And giving them the delusion that they are loving. And it comes to a crisis. At the end, it is not about, black and white, good and evil. It is about two groups. And there's no middle ground. Both claiming righteousness. Claiming to be the ones that truly love. And then what happens? That unrighteous group, which is the massive group, they offer an offering to God. And false fire comes and devours it. And the false groups say, see, we are the righteous. And they pass the death decree. That's what A.T. Jones said. And Ellen White endorsed it. So a mighty clash of who is righteous, what is love, is unfolding before our eyes. And we have to differentiate. We need Christ and we need His sanctifying power. We need Him to say, brethren, we both are actually one. So, differences. I put them down so that we can remember them. For Eastern meditation, it's discovery of pre-existing inner divinity. Pre-existing, like inborn, immortal soul. Pre-existing inner divinity. Discovery, not sanctification. Discovery through meditative practices. The true biblical meditation, as in King David, is partaking of the divine nature. Now, in 2 Peter 4, partaking of the divine nature was progressive. We start with faith. We take another step, knowledge, and then temperance, and so forth, and charity, and brotherly kindness and love. And that's a lifetime. Right? So sanctification is our walk closer and closer to Christ, closer and closer to God. So they are opposing. Right? We need to partake of the divine nature. Eastern meditation is non-differentiating love. Non-differentiating love. I think the word is, what's it called? Oxymoron, where they don't gel? Yeah, it's an oxymoron. Versus discernment and sanctification. Eastern, detachment from reality of evil. There's no discernment of good or evil. Versus God engages us against evil. The East is neural phenomena and feelings driven. It is driven by neural phenomena and feelings versus truth driven. It's will and reality disconnection, as in hypnotism. But the truth is we are made whole by reality himself, by Christ himself. There's presumed oneness with God. There's only sanctified oneness with Christ. There is no judgment versus the hour of his judgment. And that's where we are called. Praise God. So on Sabbath afternoon, on divine worship, I won't dwell into this, but on Sabbath afternoon, his words are not very clear. Well, at least I can see. Maybe it's better on this screen. All right, the first set says, I'm going to talk about Ellen White, okay, on hypnotism. Then we're going to talk about non-dual in Bible. People ask me on Wednesday night, where's all this in the Bible? That's good. It's everywhere, and I'll show you where it is. And I hope you'll be surprised, okay? It's in Zephaniah 1:12, Malachi 2:12, and etc., okay? Ellen White talked about heresy, the heresy train from Alpha to Omega. And this is what I'll talk about. The immortal soul as a foundation of Satan's masterpiece of deception. Then she talked a lot more about the wine of Babylon. We'll talk about Bible truth versus panentheism, how panentheism doesn't fit, and who are the panentheistic leaders in Christianity and what they are saying. And then we will talk about how only the everlasting gospel repudiates panentheism, the growth of panentheism. So I hope to see you for Sabbath afternoon, and I will speak more on the ACC and love and how to activate our love circuits on Sabbath for divine worship. All right, so thank you for the time.
Thank you. We're just going to open the floor just for a few questions, just for the next 7 minutes, and then we'll close our service. I want to thank Mr. Yip so much for sharing from his personal experience. As you can see and hear, he has done a lot of research. I just want to say for those who may not be of this faith, that there is no offense. This is his personal experience, so I hope none of you will feel offended or harmed in any way coming to this moment. And, you know, the reference about Dr. John Harvey Kellogg, he was a medical doctor who, if some of you eat cornflakes and other brands of cereal by Kellogg's, he was one of the pioneers, and his brother William Kellogg took it over, but he was also a Seventh-day Adventist, and it's very interesting how he went off on a tangent. And finally, I just want to say, of course, that's, as Mr. Yip emphasized, that it is not about a religion. It's about God, because God is not a religion. God is outside of religion, and he calls us into this loving relationship with him. So thank you very much for making that clear. I just wanted to also re-emphasize that this evening. So let's take a few questions, and I saw Len's hand, and we'll come to that. Would you like the mic, or would you like to stand so everyone can hear? Any clarification?